Welcome to the Recruitment Leadership Podcast, hosted by Alison Humphries. The Recruitment Leadership Podcast is here to help those in the recruitment industry gain awareness and understanding on the hot topics faced by those in the business of hiring people. In each episode, Alison Humphries is joined by a fellow expert to offer professional knowledge, insight and advice on the biggest subjects affecting recruitment businesses. It's the podcast to listen to for recruitment business frontrunners seeking expert information from industry-leading advisors. Welcome to the Recruitment Leadership Podcast.
Hello and welcome to 2023 and to the Recruitment Leadership Podcast. I'm Alison Humphries. I'm a board advisor and non-exec director for anyone who's a new listener this year, and it'd be great if you've joined us for the first time. Today is a slightly unusual episode. I'm joined today by Zena Everett. Now, Zena used to own a recruitment business back when we became friends, a couple of decades ago, I would say, Zena. And actually then left the recruitment industry and retrained as an organisational psychologist and leadership coach. And Zena now has a global conference speaking career. She's the author of The Crazy Busy Cure, all about the modern workplace. And today, slightly unusually, Zena's going to be interviewing me about the topic of leadership. And if it's passed you by, I have a new book out. It's available now on Amazon. It's called 7 Habits of Successful Recruitment Leaders. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to Zena to take control.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So I'm a bit croaky, but that's fine because Alison's going to do most of the talking, so you don't have to listen to too much of that. So I really wanted to hijack this podcast and ask Alison. I want to find out what she really thinks, because the recruitment industry is just so fascinating, isn't it, with all those great characters. And Alison has been around for so long that you've seen all these different iterations of it. So I thought, let's just relax and let's find out what she really thinks. So the first question, I suppose, Alison, is actually, how do you do it? I mean, you stay ahead of everything. You're ahead of the game. You're coming up with new ideas. You're not old school, but I suppose you bring forward those old values. So actually, why do you keep doing this? What do you love about it?
Gosh, thank you. Well, I like to think I'm up to date, and it is actually quite a job to stay on top of the recruitment industry now. Like lots of other industries, COVID really accelerated digitization and changing attitudes from clients and candidates about how communication's done and so forth. So I actually do dedicate time myself to making sure I am up to speed with new tech suppliers, new techniques that people may be using. And I also keep in touch with a sort of alumni population of people that I've worked with or even been employed by in the past. So I've always got feelers out across lots of different industries. And I guess the other thing is I look outside of individual recruitment businesses. People will be aware of a long association I've had with the REC. I'm CIPD qualified, and I make sure that I am on top of external data from a number of sources, so that hopefully I've got some sort of idea of what's coming down the line, so that I can help the people I work with get on the front foot with change rather than feeling buffeted by storms. And I think we all know what that feeling's like from 2020.
Yeah. So you always strike me as being kind of ahead of things. So you're out in front. And I guess that's what your clients want you for, is because they might have their head down in the weeds and you're saying, actually, you need to see these opportunities or these risks or whatever. I'm sure it's a little bit more intelligent than that. But leaving aside all that, what do you love about it? Because I'm sure you could have leapt off and done other things at some stage, but you've stuck at it. So, what is it about this industry that's got you so hooked?
Do you know, I'm really glad you asked that question, Zena, because I feel like I'm going to make a sort of heartfelt speech at this point, but I genuinely believe this. I cannot think of another sector where you can have such broad and varied experiences, where you can, even from a really young stage, develop it in your very early career, to have a lot of responsibility and access to really senior people. And there I'm talking about, client and candidate communities, and where you're looking right across businesses, because recruitment to me is never just about filling a seat. you know all the businesses that recruiters deal with have their own objectives, and filling headcount numbers just isn't one of them. It is about achieving what their business wants to achieve. So you have this wonderful opportunity to learn so much about so many different sectors. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I have never stopped believing that the work that the recruitment industry does is important. And yeah, sure, I know there are a lot of people who repeat stuff about, recruiters, and roll their eyes and so on and so forth. But actually, when surveyed, people who've actually had personal experience of using recruitment business services, nearly 3/4 of them are satisfied or highly satisfied with the service they receive. And the third reason is a little bit because the nature of the industry has always been that people break off from bigger organizations and start their own business. There is this constant renewal. And for someone in my business now, which is obviously advising those people and helping them hopefully avoid really expensive errors, the things they have to unpick in the future, as well as accelerating their growth, that means that there are always new people who don't know the stuff yet. They don't know what they don't know. And I just love working with them. I think the recruitment business leaders that I work with are, almost without exception, like really entrepreneurial, ambitious, optimistic, and entertaining people. So hopefully that's enough reasons.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I think there definitely is something about the recruitment industry, isn't it? Because as you said, I used to be in it, and I used to have a business that did recruitment to recruitment. And now I'm coaching in all sorts of businesses, across functions, across disciplines. And I think actually the recruitment job is really hard. We think it's very one dimensional. It isn't. It's really hard. And the caliber of people that are successful at it, of course there's colourful characters, but actually they are really, really good. And maybe we don't always realise how good we are, because I think most of the really good people stay at it, like you say. And I'm always interested in the people that have sold their businesses and then they pop up again, and they don't need the money. They just do it because I think they love the people, don't they? They love the people and the camaraderie and the learning.
I think most of us are fairly gregarious types. And so, yeah, we do like that company and exposure. But yes, like as you say, the ongoing learning is fascinating.
But tell me about that gregariousness, right? Because obviously I was in it back in the day, and I don't want to sound like some old dinosaur, so your listeners are rolling their eyes. But I mean, when occasionally I do go and catch up with contacts in recruitment, and I walk around their offices, I think, God, these are dismal. They're all emailing, people are tapping away, they've got their headphones on. It's a different job, isn't it? And I wanted to talk to you about that, the kind of the competencies of the people that you look for. And I know it's still relationship building, but how much has it changed? How much has it changed from needing those good salespeople to something a bit different?
Well, actually, I've got some fairly hard data on this.
I knew you would, Alison. You don't fly by the seat of your pants. Yeah, go on.
Interestingly, there are factors that I would say probably haven't changed. But, I've been able to work with some, quite large businesses who have gathered enough historic data through doing psychometric tests. And I mean there both aptitude and ability tests. We can go into the distinction for listeners in a moment. But we've been able to look at those those test results when they were taken at the point of recruitment, and then map how successful those people have been in recruitment and in the organisation, and therefore determine, where there's a correlation. Mostly, I have to say, I don't think it has changed. So the key factors remain goal orientation, and that's not just, I hope it goes without saying, but that's not just competitiveness. It is about constantly setting yourself the how can I be better goals and taking action on them. So goals and plans, if you like. There's a strong emphasis on communication skills. Now, those can be measured in certain psychometrics. It seems a bit odd, but you are actually measuring people's, verbal comprehension and understanding. And my observation would be that communication, as in the ability to listen and adapt your own output, remains absolutely critical. There's an element of, I might bracket it under optimism. So people who are able to spot an opportunity and have the positive approach that it may work to follow things through. There's those three things, definitely there remains a correlation. Where I've seen a little bit of a shift is that the amount of what psychometrics who are using the DISC model refer to as compliance. Now, compliance doesn't just mean obeying rules in this context, does it? It means the need to follow a framework and a process. And actually, the need for that has increased a little bit. So for success. So I suspect that is linked to the fact that recruitment agencies are more data driven, that our CRMs are absolutely critical, that there's much more regulation. Oh my goodness, so much more than when I started in recruitment. And the larger organizations will have really quite sophisticated processes that are really important. So that's a shift. And the other aspect that I would say is become really, really important is what is generally referred to as fluid intelligence. Now, for any listeners who haven't come across that term before, we have referred to it on previous podcasts. Fluid intelligence is not about IQ as such. It's not about what you've learned. It's about your ability to learn, if you will, to recognize patterns, spot anomalies, and adapt really quickly, and to absorb new information. And I do think that has become more important because you've got so many data sources coming at you, so many channels to manage. But sorry to rattle on a bit on this question, but the other point that you made when you were describing offices full of people tapping is that unfortunately there remains an issue, or rather it's become an issue because of the very low cost tools of mass broadcast. So automated email sequences, case in point, automated LinkedIn messaging. There's a section of the community that it's as if we'd never learned anything about sales at all. Now, if people think sales is just something that is made up, they're missing a huge treasury of actual data and research. There's some highly reputable consultancies that publish great research on this, and that they show us that when you're selling services like recruitment, the particular approaches work, and one of them isn't, "Hi, my name's Alison, and I've got a product. Are you interested?" And they're following it up with an automated email that says, "You haven't got back to me. At least tell me if you're not interested." Yeah. What on earth?
People really do that in recruitment.
Well, yes. So you see it in recruitment. You see it in recruitment suppliers, and it's just so unnecessary and inappropriate.
So out of everything you've described, all those sort of different elements that your wonderful recruiter has to have, and I'm sure that there's still a massive war for great talent in the recruitment industry, You're not going to get somebody who kind of ticks every single box equally. So out of everything you've said, Alison, if you had to pick one, and I know obviously there'll be contextual differences and so on, but fundamentally, out of what you said, what's most important out of all of those?
Gosh. So at entry point to the industry?
Yes. No, before they're managing, I think let's look at as for a fee earner. You're hiring a new fee earner into your business. What do you think? If they haven't got this, it's not going to work.
I think it has to be the communication skills, actually. Yeah. I feel like good leadership can actually help people become more goal orientated, important as that is. And I feel that a little bit of experience and observation can help people get better at spotting opportunities.
Yes, you can train that. You can find the motivation, but
the communication piece, you have to want it to be an intrinsic part of your job.
Do you mean a sort of a genuine curiosity about people and getting close to them? And yeah. Okay, well, I'm ticking that box because that was always the same. Because I remember, I remember when we interviewed people and they said, "Oh, I really want to get into recruitment because I like people." We'd say, "Let me just stop you there. You don't have to like them. You have to be really interested in what makes them tick and what makes them better." So it sounds like that's still a big part of it, isn't it? And also to understand the client's business and to have that kind of genuine, sharp intellectual curiosity and a bit of
which if which any listener who's thinking, well, Zena's made a complete career pivot, well, actually you've just explained the complete logic of going from your business running a recruitment business into organizational psychology and leadership. So what some people might think you've done is a career pivot. It actually there's a golden thread there, isn't there, through recruitment into your organizational psychology work.
Yeah, big time. It's still that curiosity and interest about people, which leads me on nicely to the next question, actually. So Alison, it's just you and me here, so you can be completely honest. When a new recruitment entrepreneur approaches you and says, come and work with us, what do you look for? What are the red flags that you spot when you listen to them? They're describing their business, they're describing their goals and how they operate. What makes your heart sink and say, uh-oh?
Right. Well, strictly between the two of us.
Between the two of us, yeah.
Okay. The first is where people are exclusively focused on the potential money that they're going to earn. And there's quite a lot of discussion about this in my book, that some people have taken that Simon Sinek, start with the why. And they think that they proudly tell me that their aim is to be in and out in a certain time frame and be worth X number of millions. And that makes my heart sink. It's not necessarily a complete rule out, because sometimes they're just copying what they think is a cool thing to say, But that makes my heart sink if people don't have any other aim, because actually you're not going to be in total control of that, making those millions and when you can exit a business. And if people start purely with the money in mind, they tend to create businesses which are not very attractive to the employees, under-resourced, and they're businesses that are always, how can I put it, scrabbling around to scrape some money out of somebody, rather than creating a strong client network. So sometimes it's just what comes out, it's front of mind, but that I would always probe that. The second thing is that many recruiters have been very successful without ever getting involved in anything much behind the scenes as an employee. And they perhaps don't have much idea about what's involved in running a business. And there is a world of difference between being a good recruiter and building a good recruitment business. And so when I hear somebody saying, look, I'm not interested in compliance, I'm not interested in HR, finance, I don't understand it, I just leave that all to my accountant, that is a really worrying sign, because they may not know it, but they're the people with the liability. And I've seen a number of examples of people who have delegated without understanding what they're delegating, and have been effectively exploited by suppliers, or in some cases they've just ended up with something very different from what they thought they were ending up with, or paid through the nose for it unnecessarily, because they just didn't bother to try to understand what the accountant, for example, was saying to them. And it's really easy to hoodwink people like that.
And maybe they're not taking their role seriously. They don't actually understand, if I'm a CEO or a managing director or whatever they're calling themselves, what does that mean? It's just not the person out in the front.
Yes, so true. And in some cases, it takes the form of people, they haven't made that mental leap that their company is a separate legal entity from them, and they're still using it as a sort of personal piggy bank. In some cases, it's to do with, the magic day. This is where, when you start talking to them about things like, well, actually, your employment contracts are completely inadequate, or you've got no staff policies. Oh, yeah, we'll sort all that out one day. Now, that magic day, we all dream of it, don't we? It's the day when everything's done and there's like a really reliable revenue stream, and everybody's happy in work, and you can then go and sort out these details. You can't. You never will be able to. And by then you'll have created so many problems. So people who think that it's just a box ticking exercise, or unimportant, are very often setting themselves up for problems. And a good example of that would be where business owners have, effectively been taken hostage by one or a couple of really big billers, and they let them get away with absolutely anything. And the culture that creates and the knock-on consequences of that can actually bring a business down. And I've seen that happen, where as a consequence of what that a big biller was doing, the company was fined, and it in effect it made it not worth running anymore. So it can be really messy, and people who think that's unimportant, yeah, that's a warning sign for me. So yeah, people who don't understand all their responsibilities, who aren't interested in it, people who think it's all just about selling. And I think there is one other warning sign for me, and that is, from day one, someone who is saying that they don't want to manage people, they just want to hire someone in to do that. You cannot be a recruitment business leader and just be a biller and hire someone to do everything else. It's not your business then, and you're still liable for it. So the idea that you can delegate everything, I think, is a false one.
And also that people aren't going to copy your behaviors. You can't say, I'm just going to get on with this. You just, yeah. Okay. So that sounds like it's a bit of a shift, really, from people thinking, I am running a serious business here and I've got to act like a leader, whatever that looks like. And even if I'm still going to be the top biller, I can't just devote 100% of my time to do that. And I can't just, it's not a lark. It's serious, isn't it? Okay. So somebody listening to this, beginning of January, setting intentions for next year, what would you tell them to deal with? What would be the problem that you say, nip it in the bud now, don't let it fester? So thinking about your top biller, for example, would that be something, or do you think?
That would definitely be one. It would be one about standards and behaviours, really. And I don't want that to blow that out of proportion, because I do think actually the overall standard of behaviour has improved dramatically across the industry internally. So that would be one. I think another one, if they're setting purposes for the year, would be to have effective implementation plans for changes that they want to make. Now, it's all a little bit uncertain and volatile, the environment we're in at the moment. And although pretty much everyone I know has still got lots and lots of work on, there's highly likely to be some great loss of confidence amongst most client groups. And now is the time to fix the roof, because there's a generation of newish recruiters out there who have never known a market that isn't awash with jobs. And my observation would be that they have they really struggle to, for example, have any kind of dialogue with a client or, former client, unless it's about filling a job. They don't know how to develop that account, keep the lines of communication open, or add value in any way that isn't sending CVs. Yeah, but that they are going to need to do that, and so for most businesses, and statistically, most recruitment businesses are still employ fewer than 9 people. It's something like 84% employ fewer than 9 people. So it really is the biggest chunk of the market. There's no excuse for the founder or directors not to get their heads under the bonnet and listen to what people are actually doing on calls. Look at what they're sending out and think about quality. Because actually there's a sort of a low baseline, where people have actually still been able to make some money over the last 2 years, even without being a good recruiter. Do not kid yourself that means your people are good recruiters.
And hey, Alison, do you think the time has moved on from recruiters when they're asked why they're different to say honesty and integrity? So it's like fish and chips, isn't it? What makes you different? So can I tell you, I did some happy research before this. And so I thought, right, I'm going to really go through. I went through a load of recruitment websites for connections that you and I have in common to see how they say. And on their homepage, why use us? And I've got together an amalgamation of what they all say. It is, and you tell me about this. So this is it. Fundamentally, they say, the fundamental principles. They're the two things, aren't they? The fundamental principles on which our business operates are integrity, professionalism, and honesty. So what other industry has to make a bit of point of saying, we don't rip you off?
I know. I mean, surely that's just a given.
But that seems to be the whole kind of pillar. Then they say there's always something about we go the extra mile to deliver outstanding service and relationships at the heart of what we do. And then I went on to some of the outsourcing pages on some of the big consulting firms. And they talk about things like commitment to multicultural dynamic workplaces and responding with agility to your staffing needs, finding wonderful talent with tech. They talk a bit about why their tech is special and different, mindful of the collective interests of our candidate community. One said, we're impartial, we're uncorruptible. This is what we mean. This is why we're totally objective. You thought, we've got to, does that annoy you? We've got to move over from this thing.
We've got to raise our game on this. I couldn't agree more with you, Zena. And I'll give you a couple of my particular trigger ones. We have 40 years of combined experience. Do you know what that makes me do? It makes me just look and see, oh, right, you've got 10 staff. So actually you've got 4 years of experience on average. And by the way, if you've only ever done one job in that, really that's just 1 year's experience 4 times, isn't it? So it to me, it just highlights the lack of experience across the business. That's a terrible one. Honesty, integrity, I agree with you. And there is a really important point about having a deep understanding of the sector you serve. But it's no good just telling people you've got it. Your website needs to demonstrate it.
Yeah, exactly. There's no point just saying it because everybody says that stuff, don't they?
They do. And everybody who says it believes it. Do you know, here's the funny thing. In 37 years, I've never met a self-confessed dishonest recruiter who didn't have a deep understanding of their sector. At least not one that recognised that they didn't, So, where's the evidence? Show me, don't tell me. Yeah, I think that's really key. And the other one I was going to say was this attempt to be all things to all people. So a classic is we specialise in, And then there's a list of like 17 sectors and 25 job titles and geographies spanning Asia, Europe, Middle East. Like that's not specialism. Be clear.
I mean, it's funny, but there's an awful lot that is still, like you said, it's been a great market for a few years. So you can get away with that, can't you? You can get away with it. But actually, this is a time to fix your roof. I love that analogy. And there was quite a bit about a little bit about diversity, but there was no, our commitment to multicultural workplaces is demonstrated by our multicultural team. There was none of that. So we've got to get ahead, haven't we? I think I'm not in recruitment, but but we do have to get ahead of all this stuff, don't we? And like you say, really walk the talk and evidence it.
I agree with you. I think that we can do better. And new business owners are down in the weeds very often, and it's very hard for them to see what messages are going out there to people that they're not having a conversation with directly at the moment. And so I had a good example. It was a small business placing temporary and permanent accountants in London. And I looked at their website after they made contact with me. Nowhere on that website did it mention anything about London or accountants or permanent and temporary recruitment.
Great, yeah.
So they just not seen it from the outside,
What I find really interesting is when I talk to recruiters and they tell me about their technology, particularly for sourcing candidates, I think, gosh, that's so interesting. But they don't share that on their sites. And for me, externally, I would think, right, I'll go to that one because they've got the technology that does this and this. Probably not realizing that maybe all recruiters have that now. But maybe we just don't, we're not explicit enough about. So why do you think recruitment leaders miss this? What are they focusing their energy on instead?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. I would be speculating, but I would guess that they miss it because they think about the conversations and the direct dialogue that they're having one-on-one with clients and candidates. And because typically they're good at communicating, those are good and warm. And they are often able to demonstrate the things that they're good at, like their industry knowledge and so forth, in that conversation. But they don't necessarily put it out at high-level communications just because, because they don't necessarily realize its value to external organizations, how it might look. I think perhaps we've got, most of us are career recruiters, and it's very easy to get lost in that world and assume that people know stuff that they don't.
So you mean that they've come from a stable, they've set up their own business, they make it a nicer place to work, whatever that looks like, or they think they do, but they're just recreating as opposed to going to clients to say, you talk to me about your dream recruiter and then we'll work that way.
Exactly. And if there's one conversation that I would urge people who are thinking about opening a business or have even already done it to have with themselves, that is, okay, why does the world need another recruitment business? There are so many of them. What is it that you are going to do better, faster, cheaper even than the existing businesses? How can you prove it? And how can you make sure that it happens every time? And if you've got that clear in your head, you can take that message to the people, and it will be seen and understood by the people who value that. So if you're selling on being fast, sell to people who value that. If you're selling on thoroughness, do it that way.
Yeah. And what does that actually mean, I suppose? I do remember in recruiting recruiters, I think probably I was only ever asked a few times by candidates who'd say, if I have got a client base and I know that I can move them and I will, why should I take my candidate base, or my client base, I mean, to that particular company? Why will my clients be better at this new recruitment business than the one that they're leaving? How can they help me do a better job? And that was a very rare conversation.
Yeah. But it should be happening all the time, shouldn't it? Yeah.
It should be. Yeah. Yeah. So when has somebody surprised you?
A recruitment business leader.
Yeah. When have you thought, when have they, yeah, well, when have they surprised you? When have they have lived up to your expectation, or maybe they've exceeded your expectation?
Yes, actually, both, I think. So one particular case springs to mind, and it's actually a former employer of mine, who, if listening, will recognise themselves. I've, always used to be like introduce ideas and head down and go at stuff. And I remember this particular business owner saying to me, "Listen, don't worry about, you haven't dropped the ball. You've put it, you can go and put that ball down in the corner of a room and you know it's there and you do it later, but deal with this ball properly right now." And one of the biggest things that individual taught me was that implementation thrashes ideas out the park every time. Ideas are cheap, but if you're going to build a substantial business, you need to be able to implement stuff that sticks. And I really hope I've taken that lesson to all the people I work with now, because I think it's not an uncommon issue with recruitment business leaders, and
So you mean they just get so in the weeds, like you're saying, they haven't, but they're full of ideas, but they haven't got time to.
yeah, or they love an idea and they rush it out, but they don't think, well, hang on, if I'm actually going to make this stick, I'm going to need to think about, there's probably some training needed. There's probably some collateral or tools or reminders, visual reminders for people. There's probably something we have to do to the CRM. There's likely to be some, if we're trying to create a change, we might need to have some short-term incentive. And if it doesn't work, we might even need to have some short-term penalties for some people. We need to, have a rollout plan and check-in points so that we can see we're on track, because, change, and that's usually what you're trying to do as a leader, in one way, shape or another, that change has always got the sort of the gravity pulling against it, hasn't it? And therefore, if you have check-in points that say, look, this may still feel painful and awkward, but we're on the right track. Otherwise, people will go, do you know what? Oh, it's not working. Let's give up and go back to the way we were doing things, because that was easier. It was familiar, wasn't it? So I think it's fair to say I have seen some remarkable successes with people who, like me, have learned that. There's also, I think, some people have surprised me by their genuine willingness to take a punt on a new market. So the US is the big buzz at the moment, as you're probably aware. And lots of businesses, I think, maybe just concentrate on getting things right here in the UK first. But I've seen some real success with people doing that, and they've been willing to just go and make those approaches. Sometimes they've been a bit scattergun at first, but they've really impressed me by sticking with it and going back to, right, where can we get referrals, and successfully building new revenue streams like that. One other thing that springs to mind is that I've been working with a business leader who needs to create a management infrastructure below himself. And his instinct said, look, we'll just let people develop into the role, and it can be gradual. It's going to be gradual anyway, because there's so much learning done in there. But what impressed me was when I said, I said to him, actually, you can't just try and let people slide into leadership roles. They can't move from being one of the peeps to their manager unless there is a line in the sand and an announcement. And this particular individual was very unwilling to go with that, because he thought it was putting too much pressure on people and would create tensions unnecessarily. But actually, when we went through it in detail, I was really impressed with the way he went with what I was proposing at the time, which was that you need to draw a line in the sand, give people a clear job description, tell everyone else what that job description is, tell them when they can still come to you, and let these individuals actually just come up with an initial plan for their teams. Yeah, so that's been an interesting one recently. So the answer is, Zena, they're constantly surprising me, in good ways and not so good. But I think the main thing I've learned from my work with them is that you've got to manage yourself if you're going to be a successful leader first. I've been, certainly in the past, got myself into a spiral of too much stress, trying to take on too much all at once, and learning to spot those signs in yourself and get support. I think that's really, really helpful lesson for all leaders.
Well, on that note, final question then. If 2023 plays out fantastically for you, Alison, what are your goals?
Well, I really hope I can carry on doing what I do now. I love doing it. I love working with a very selected number of people to actually see real results in their business. I hope that a number of my clients are going to win some more awards, industry awards this year, and that some people will buy my book, 7 Habits of Recruitment Leaders. That's mine. So thank you.
Well, it's lovely to talk to you, and maybe you'll let me come back and talk to you about those 7 habits. I'd love that.
Yes, that would be great. Zena, thank you very much for joining me today. It's been great fun talking to you about thoughts and observations on the industry generally. And for anyone who's listening and is interested, go have a look on Amazon. The book is available for order now. Okay, thank you.
You've been listening to the Recruitment Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed our podcast, please subscribe, review and share so that others can find the podcast too. We really appreciate your support. If you have any questions about the topics covered or wish to find out more about recruitment leadership, please email alison@recruitmentleadership.co.uk, referencing the podcast. We're also on LinkedIn, where you can follow Recruitment Leadership and connect with Alison Humphries. Thank you for listening, and we hope you join us next time for another episode of the Recruitment Leadership Podcast.